Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here today. Today, we're going to talk about how you can own your Jira configuration with some deep visibility into your Jira instance and understanding the impacts of your changes. But before I present myself and before we even start, I wanted to tell you what I hope you'll get from this talk. So by the end of this talk, I hope you'll be convinced why we all need to apply DevOps principles to Jira administration. You'll know how to essentially take your Jira instance and find anything, everything you want across your entire instance. I'll show you how, and I'll give you a link for our free tool, which will enable you to do that. And finally, I hope you will be at least 30% less afraid and less scared to make big changes to your Jira instance. I hope that sounds good. Let's start. So my name is Lior Neudorfer. I'm a product manager at Salto. I live in Tel Aviv, best city in the world. I hope you visited Tel Aviv. If not, please come next summer. Married with two wonderful kids, avid gamer. Actually, I took some time off from the new Monkey Island to prepare this presentation. So it was hard, but I did it. And maybe most importantly, I've been a Jira administrator and user for more than 15 years now in various workplaces. So I have a lot of experience in both sides of the Jira world. A bit about Salto. So Salto was founded 3 years ago. We have offices here in Tel Aviv and also in San Francisco. We're a bit more than 70 employees today, and we're well funded by some of the world's top VCs. And on the bottom, you see some of our customers and users who use our tool, like I'm going to show you by the end of this session, to get visibility to their Jira, Zendesk, Salesforce, and more. Okay, before we dive into Jira, I want to zoom out for a second and talk about the modern company. So most modern companies, and I'm sure yours as well, essentially run by using various SaaS applications, not just in R&D, but in sales, marketing, customer support, finance. Each department has its own SaaS applications, right? If customer support is using Zendesk and maybe Jira as well, finance team uses Oracle NetSuite, sales maybe uses Salesforce, maybe Jira as well. So SaaS applications essentially run the modern company. However, let's talk about the challenges about using these SaaS applications. And let's take Jira as an example. So you have a modern company and you have a Jira instance which has been around for 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. How do you actually know what's implemented in that instance? So which workflows you have, what custom fields, how are they used, which projects? This is a lot of information, and can you really know what's implemented easily? Let's dive in. If you see a specific change in Jira today, for example, you see some custom fields, do you know who made this change and when and why this field was added? And if we look forward, if you're going to make a change, you're going to change a field, you're going to add a status to a workflow, do you know what's going to be the impact of that change? And that impact can be inside Jira. So I changed the field name and now some Jira automation broke, but it can also be outside of Jira. So maybe there is some external integration which relies on something on Jira you just changed. How can you be sure that what you're planning to do doesn't break anything? And essentially, how do we develop changes in Jira or other business applications in a reliable way without impacting production? I hope these pains resonate with you because we're going to talk about how we can make things better and how we think things should be. Okay, so even let's continue with challenges. You're going to do a big change, and you're one Jira admin, but you have a team of Jira admins. How do you use their expertise to review these changes collaboratively? Once you're done with these changes, hopefully you're not doing them on production, but on some sandbox or testing instance. How do you then reliably promote them from your testing instance to production without doing it manually? If you did break something in production, how do you roll back that change and the entire change with all the tiny bits, right? How do you bring back production to where it was before your change? And finally, if there's a need for some compliance, there's an auditor which needs to see which changes were made and when, how do you leave a reliable paper trail for that auditor to see? So these are all questions for Jira, but essentially for any SaaS application. Think about Zendesk or Salesforce. These are all relevant for all these business applications. Now, let's talk about what we suggest. And before I talk about what we suggest, let's talk about another revolution which helped us exactly the same things, but in a different space, the IT world. Think about IT infrastructure and think about where we were 10, 15 years ago. I remember I had to spin up a new virtual machine, maybe a cluster of virtual machines in some VMware instance. And I had to do it manually throughout all sorts of wizards. And it was really hard and manual. And when a month later I had to do it again, then I had to do the entire process again. But this was 15 years ago. And since then, there was this revolution, which essentially said, instead of doing things manually, you should represent things as code. So take all the good things from the development world and apply them to infrastructure and IT. For example, with tools like Terraform, okay? So before that revolution, everything was manual. You needed to build and spin up infrastructure and change infrastructure in a manual way with organizational silos, each one controlling a different part of the infrastructure. And this led to long delivery cycles and slow releases and eventually not a great quality of service. Once we automated everything with code, for example, with tools like Terraform, I can now spin up a cluster of VMs with writing a short code and launching it. That's it. So I can change things faster in a more reliable way with better quality. And that revolution, think about it. We like 15 years ago till today, it's a huge revolution in the IT space. Okay, so what do we suggest? We suggest a similar revolution in the business application world. So let's take all these best practices and methodologies and these tools from the software development world and the DevOps world. Let's take these concepts and apply them to how we manage our business applications. Let's talk about what this actually means. And by the way, we call it business engineering, because essentially that's what you are. If you're a Jira administrator, you're an engineer working on your business application. So what does that mean? What does that mean, business engineering for your Jira instance? So think about your Jira instance. It has thousands of tiny configurations, fields, statuses, workflows, projects, automations. Think of, instead of having all these spread around in Jira, we think you should have a clear and complete textual representation of that implementation with declarative or code, which means that turn all this configuration to code files. And now, once you have all these tiny configuration items in one place, there's one piece of code, you can easily answer questions about the implementation. I need to find something. I just do Command F or Control F, depends on your Mac or PC. You do Command F and you search for a specific field or a specific workflow, as easy as that. Once you have all this configuration, all this Jira configuration as code, it means you can use a source control system like Git. So if you make a change in your Jira configuration, which is a change in your code, you can then create a new version. So each change in your Jira instance is represented by a version in a Git source control system. So, and think about how powerful this is if you want to answer any question about what happened over time. So, hey, I can see that there was a Jira configuration a month ago by this administrator which changed the field, because it's now versions in source control, like software. We can also use code analysis tools to answer any question you may have on dependencies or change impact, analyze the code, understand how, for example, custom fields are used, what would break if I would add something to them, and I'll show you how it works. And it enables you to create shared responsibility within the team. So if one administrator now does a change in Jira, instead of that admin touching Jira in a specific place, he now changes code, which another admin can review, and other admins can see in Git, okay, this person is doing this change. Maybe we should say something if it looks bad, or if we think that will affect something else. So think about this world where your entire configuration is now code. Let's take it even further. If everything is code, if all your configuration is code, it's super easy to develop things not on production, but on sandboxes. So spin up another Jira cloud instance, do everything there, and then push this code from the sandbox to production. It enables you to make your changes without impacting production, to test them without impacting production, and finally, behave like a software developer, but for Jira configuration. So if you are going to change something in Jira, change it in Jira, and then in code, you can open a feature branch, you can open a pull request, you can have another admin do a code review for your Jira change. And finally, when you're done with that change, you can merge that change from a Jira branch, from a Git branch, the feature branch, to the main branch, and deploy it to production. So behave in Jira like software developers do. Rollbacks are super easy. You just git revert to a specific version and deploy it. And finally, if you use a source control system like software developers do, in each commit, in each change, you also attach a ticket ID. So I'm going to create a new project in Jira or make a change to an automation in Jira. I should first open a ticket in Jira or any other system about this, describe it. And when I do that change and commit it to Git, attach the ticket ID, like software developers do, right? So, and that's the perfect audit trail or change log. I saw someone wrote in the chat that it's like a change log. It's the perfect, reliable, accurate change log for your business application, in this case, Jira. I hope this makes sense so far. I want to tell you now what we do in Salto. So we build tools for business engineers. The Salto platform essentially enables you to connect your Jira to Salto, and it transforms your entire Jira configuration into text, into something which is searchable, which means now you can find and explore within this configuration. You get complete visibility to your entire configuration, all the tiniest, weirdest bits of Jira, field context and what have you, all in one place, searchable with a single search box. You get the ability to deploy things from one place to another. So pick any two cloud instances and compare them, and then say, okay, I have a change in this environment, which I want to move to another environment. It's doable with 4 clicks. And you can even further automate it, like, and actually build a real CI/CD platform in your organization. So Jira changes can actually be automated, right? You change something in a sandbox, somebody does a review, you submit a pull request, and once it's approved, it's automatically deployed to production. So you can push changes in a reliable, frequent way. And it all builds upon this shared base of representing everything as files, which are being version controlled. So any change you make to Jira is represented by a change in these files, which is version controlled, which means you can do rollbacks, you can analyze if something's broken, you can analyze who broke it, why, when, and it enables you to get perfect documentation for your Jira instance. Okay, let's dive in some more. And after this, I promise you to show you some cool demos as well. So let's talk about Jira. And I've been talking to tens of Jira admins in the last year to better understand your pains and your needs, and to think about how Salto can help you using this technology, which turns Jira into code and back, how it can help you solve these pains. So the first one is, I heard a lot, there's a change I did in one instance or one project, for example, one Jira project, which I want to migrate to another instance, or within an instance from one project to another project. And instead of manually doing that, and I heard that a lot, I'm doing everything in testing, I'm doing a huge change to my Jira project in testing, and I'm documenting it in a Google Doc, every single change I'm making. I added a project and edited its permission scheme, and I added a workflow, and I changed this status, and I document every single thing. I test everything in one instance. And when I'm good to go, I go to my production instance and I open this Google document and I go over the steps and essentially do everything again manually. We save you all that work, right? Do you make your changes in one instance, let's call it sandbox or testing, automatically compare that instance to production, and you'll see, oh, these are new things, select them, click deploy, and you're done. You migrated your changes from one place to another without any manual work. Same thing works when you want to compare and align your projects. You probably ended up after a few years of administrating Jira, you end up in a place where you have tons of projects, each one with its own differences, and you want to align them. You want to make sure that they're using shared configuration or similar configuration. Super easy. If everything is code, if everything's a file, you can just compare these files and see the differences, and then again use Salto to align it. Let's talk about this Control F. It's really powerful, and I'm going to demonstrate it in a few minutes. You're going to make a change. You're going to add or edit a value in a select custom field, in a select box custom field. I want to make sure that after I make this change, nothing breaks. So what the most reasonable thing to do is ask the question, who uses this field? Who looks at this field? Automations, boards, dashboards, projects, workflow transitions, whatever. You need a powerful tool to answer that simple question. Who uses a specific custom field? So, but if everything is code, like Salto does, it's super easy, right? You just search for that field's name or ID. Another thing that we heard is about Jira instance consolidation. It may be different teams, each one using their own Jira instance. It may be a company which acquired more companies and then end up with 5 huge Jira instances, and you want to consolidate them, but it's hard. And doing it manually with imports and exports, and I heard really interesting stories about creative ways that how people did this. Instead of that, use Salto. You have files, right? So compare these instances, select the things you want to consolidate into another instance, and with a few clicks, you can transfer your entire configuration and consolidate these instances. I also saw this in the chat. I agree. Jira's audit log is okay, but it's not great. You don't really get all the information you want from there. If you want to understand, 2 days ago something broke, and you go to the audit log to try and understand what happened 2 days ago, it doesn't give you all the information, and you need every bit of information, like exactly who did what and when. But if everything is code and everything is in source control, then super easy to do that. And finally, visibility to what your team is doing. Sometimes you're a single admin, and then it's less of a problem, but sometimes you have a team of admins, or maybe you even delegated some permissions to a wider audience of users in your organizations, but you still care about a specific part. You're super afraid that somebody will touch a specific part, and you just want a visibility to what's going on, maybe even alerts if somebody touches a specific area. This is one of the things that Salto does as well. If everything is code, you can select a piece of code and say, hey, if somebody touches this code, let me know. Or just browse this code by yourself to see who did what change and when. I think this is a good time to answer questions. So I'll look at the chat. Sagi already answered the question about Jira DC. So it's coming soon. Right now, we support Jira Cloud. And actually, our free offering supports it. You'll get a link by the end of this session. Is there any limit to rollback? It depends on you. You get to see, if we're talking about rollbacks, which is essentially taking your Jira configuration to a previous point in time, then you get to decide, right? You'll see a comparison of now versus then, and you'll get to decide, okay, I want to take these changes and roll them back. There is no inherent limit. However, it may be dangerous. You don't want to roll back good things. You only want to roll back maybe things that broke your instance. So we supplied the capability, but you need to be smart about it. And we give you all the tools to understand what was made when. Regarding third-party add-ons, it depends. That's the answer. The question was, are configurations made from third-party add-ons be valid? So the answer is, it depends. If these third-party add-ons changed standard Jira stuff, so if a third-party add-on added a workflow or changed a field or added a project, of course, we'll read those as well. But if these add-ons by themselves have some configuration which is stored out of Jira, we can't see it. So then not completely. And finally, the last question is, how is the Jira configuration stored as code? Great question. That's our secret sauce. That's how Salto started. We actually developed a really cool language which can represent configuration of business applications. It's called Knuckle. The engine which does it, by the way, is open source, so you can use it as well. I'll show you in a demo how it looks like, but think about Terraform files, like I think HCL files, which say how infrastructure should look like. It's very similar. So there's a file which says there should be a Jira workflow. Its name is this, the statuses are those, the transition are these. It's just a declaration of how a workflow looks like in our own special language. And we know how to take the Jira instance and transform it to this special language and back. So you can actually make changes in code and push it back. We don't restrict. There's another question: do we restrict changes or just notify of any changes? I guess that if I understand it correctly in my language, you're asking if I'm monitoring a specific area for changes, can I actually prevent these changes from happening, or do I just know that they happened and then notify someone? So we don't prevent them. We can notify you, about these changes, but we're not in line. We're not somehow between the user and Jira preventing them from doing stuff. So you'll get an alert. And then if you want, you can quickly go in and change it back or do whatever you want, or even attach this alert to some automation. That's up to you, but we don't somehow prevent it, if that was the question. Yeah, you can tie everything with automations, but that's more creative. Thanks. Great questions. Let's move forward. Okay, so I want to show you two cool demos of Jira. The first one is, I promised you, I'll show you how to find everything in your configuration. Essentially, do Control F within your entire Jira configuration, find whatever you want and understand where they are used, and what is it good for? Essentially, it's good for you to know where things are used, so it will be very hard for you to break things accidentally. If you're going to change something and you can easily find everything everywhere it's used, then you'll be way more careful about the change, and you'll know how to make this change without breaking stuff. Okay, so Jira. I have two environments here. I'll work on this one right now. It's think about it as my testing environment. And in this environment, I have a field, a new custom field, a single choice select field, which is called compliance type. Why? Because I need for every issue, if it affects any kind of compliance in my organization, such as a GDPR, I need to know it. Okay, so let's say this is the field. I have already a project which uses it and everything, and maybe I build some automation on top of it, and some boards on top of it. And now I want to make a change. I want to make a change to this custom field, and I'm a bit afraid because, if I start playing with these options, for example, to add an option or edit an option, something may break. And Jira isn't great about letting me know about it. I can delete this field. Jira will let me delete this field, even if it's being used in an automation, for example, which is problematic, which is not great. So let's see what we can do. And for that, I'll jump into Salto. And again, this is something you'll all be able to do by yourself by the end of this session. So this is the Salto platform. And what you see here is, you see Jira Sandbox 2. This is essentially the Salto representation of that Jira instance, which I just showed you. So what Salto did is it connected to Jira, pulled all the configuration into it, and it's here. So I can actually browse all the boards I have, dashboards, filters, everything is here. Let's search for our compliance field. Okay, so I can search for compliance type, and there it is. It's a Jira field called compliance type. It has all sorts of, the values, the name, its compliance type, the type. But what's important here is this part, used by. This is where Salto's magic comes into play, right? Because we not only did we read the entire Jira configuration, but we actually created a graph of dependencies. So we know that this compliance type field is actually being used, for example, by a single automation. When ISO compliance assigned, notify some group. And it's used by a filter, the compliance board filter. And it's used in two screens, in the JC22 project bug screen and default issue screen, right? So with one click, I'm able to know, okay, if I'm going to change this field, I better check these things to make sure they're still okay after this. I hope that makes sense. So for example, I want to add a new value because I understand that, let's go to the values. I understand that this ISO thing actually has another type. It's ISO 27001 and ISO 27001 type B. And I want to add an option, but I'm a bit afraid, and I see that there's an automation which uses this, this field. So I can jump to this automation, and let's actually click this, which opens it in Jira, right? And I can see this automation actually checks when this compliance type field equals this value, and then it notifies some group. So now I can fix this automation, because if I leave it like this and I add another type of ISO, then something is wrong with this automation, right? It won't catch that value. So now I can add that value, right? Let's do it. So I can add the ISO 27 type B, okay? Let's say it's a new type of compliance, right? Just refresh our automation here. Okay, so when compliance type changes, and so now instead of it's equal to this, I want to say it's one of these. Great, and save it. Okay, so again, in my sandbox, because we as business engineers, we don't want to do what I just did in production. In a sandbox, I added an option to my field because I had to, and I fixed the automation because Salto enabled me to really easily understand that this field is being used by this automation. And I may need to do these things for maybe this filter in the compliance board, the screens, and I need to go over these things to understand the impact of my change. But again, super easy because of Salto. So find everything, right? Again, think about this as a single search box for all these configurations, from screens to projects to issue types. Single search finds everything across. Cool. I am going to take some questions before going to the next demo. Can we upgrade Jira? No, Jira upgrades are out of our scope. You can change configuration. Thanks for that. That's awesome. Okay, but I'm going to show you something even more awesome. How much time do we have left? Okay, we have some time. So we changed our field. We understood that it's being used by some automation. So we went and changed that automation to use our new field configuration as well. And then we're done. Let's say we tested everything in the sandbox. We opened issues. We saw that our automation works and it notifies whatever. Everything's okay. But now we have the task of actually moving this to production, right? So this is how we think things should be done. You do them on your sandbox. By the way, before this session, I actually copied this field from my production into my sandbox. I did the changes on my sandbox, tested it there, and then deployed back to production without Google Documents documenting what I did, without any manual work, without importing and exporting XMLs, without, some people use it, clone a project within an instance and do all that. I want to show you how it's done the Salto way. So let's deploy this. So I want to deploy the changes I just did. First of all, we need to fetch them, right? We need to tell Salto, hey, I did some things in my Jira instance. So go pick these changes up. By the way, Salto also does this automatically, but for example, on an hourly basis, but I want to fetch the latest and greatest now. And once I fetch these, great. By the way, if somebody asked, how does this code looks like? Let's see what this fetch actually brought in. This is showing you the fetch results. So I can see that, for example, this is the code. This is the Salto code representation of the automation. you see that the code, the automation code equals changed into one-off, and in the field values, it now has both values. Okay, that's like behind the scenes, underneath the engine. Usually you don't have to see that. Okay, let's deploy. Remember, we are here to deploy these changes from sandbox to production. So my source is sandbox 2. My target is production, deploying ISO 27 type B, create deployment. Okay, so the first thing it shows me is a comparison of these two environments. What's different about them? Let me search for our change. And you actually see here that on my field, right? The options, if you look at the options in my field context, I have a new option, and this is something I want to deploy. Great. I also want to deploy that automation, by the way. So let's search for, let's search for that automation. Great. I can see this automation here. Perfect. Okay, so I selected the two things that I want to move, the automation and the field itself. And now I'm telling Salto, okay, please make sure that this is actually possible, that I haven't deployed something which depends on something else, that there are no errors, and you see everything's okay. I click deploy. Deploy essentially does what we need. It takes the automation and the field from my sandbox and pushes them to production. And now let me convince you that it worked. This is actually my production environment. It's a bit different. Now, if I look at the context and default value here, then I see this new field, this new option came up in production as well. So again, recapping, we did changes in sandbox, tested them, and then with Salto, selected these changes, move them to production with 2 clicks. That's it. No manual work needed. And by the way, now you can push these changes to Git. You can create a version. You can code review it. You can have people look at these changes and many, many more things. I'll answer some questions now because we're almost done. We're almost out of time. There's a question about tickets. We don't deal with data, essentially. So we're dealing with the Jira configuration. We do not copy the issues themselves. You can do that with other tools. You can create the data. If you need in the sandbox some data to play with, you can create some sample tickets there. But essentially, we care about the metadata. We care about the configuration and not about the massive amount of data themselves. The permission scope need by Salto, we need essentially what we give us is what we'll be able to show. So admin access or just a token for your admin should bring you everything usually. It doesn't work only with Jira. Everything you saw works on Jira, Salesforce, Zendesk, Oracle NetSuite, and many more applications. You can read about that in our website. Thank you for the great questions. A few things to wrap this. So I hope you got what I wanted you to get from this session, which is how you can use Salto to gain visibility to your Jira instance. I hope you understand why we think we should all be better and not work manually on production, but instead work like software developers or DevOps in the right way. Do things on Sandbox, test them on Sandbox, then deploy them to production, all with some version control in the background, all with code reviews and feature branches, which are things I haven't dived in today because we don't have a lot of time. If you have any other questions, please ask them in the chat now or send me an email. there's a link on the screen right now, salto.io/JiraCon. If you go there, you'll get to our free offering, sign up. So it's free forever. It's not a trial or anything. You can sign up, connect your Jira instance today, like right now, go do that, and play with it. You get all the visibility and dependency mapping capabilities that I showed you. You get them there for free. So it's a really cool way to explore your Jira instance and plan for changes. So please try it out. And if you can let us know what you think through the app itself or using email, that would be great. Let's see if there are more questions. Does it work with cascade fields or fields from other third-party apps? So if a custom field, if these third-party apps created custom fields within Jira, yes, we will see them. For example, JSM does that with a lot of fields. So we see them, we convert them to code, and then everything you saw applies to those as well. So everything within Jira's standard world, we see if these extensions build other things external to Jira, or store some configuration external to Jira, or use some structures which are not the standard ones, we won't see it, but we do plan to add support to more and more add-ons as time goes and according to user demand. So if there's something specific, let us know. By the way, you can also visit our virtual booth and set up a one-on-one there. That's it from my end. Great. The per user cost, is it just to access Salto? So the link here, it's for free, no per user cost. You go in, you link your Jira, you can use it today. If you want to upgrade, then it's a per user cost, but let us know and we'll explain it more thoroughly. There's also a pricing page which talks about the differences between our the free version and the enterprise version. So go to our website, salto.io, and you'll see it there. Another question, can we control who is allowed to push into production? So yes, if you have multiple users, we actually use the user token, each user's token, to do these actions. So if a specific user doesn't have access to touch things in production, then that user won't be able to do it through Salto as well. We don't share the admin token with everyone and then everyone can touch production. Each user has its own Jira permissions, essentially. We do use the admin token to fetch, but in order to deploy, in order to push to production, each user is going to use their own Jira token, which means if a user can't touch production in Jira, he won't be able to touch production through Salto either. I hope, Bill, that answers both of your questions. Okay, great. I'm happy I answered that question. Let me see if there's anything else here. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Attend our booth, send me an email, go use Salto now, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your JiraCon conference. Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.